Hello and welcome to episode 4 now of the Porsche 996 Hartech 3.7 conversion series. In this episode we look at the post-mortem of my current engine. So basically Hartech they've inspected the whole car and they've pulled the engine and they've got it all apart, and they have found a couple of things which we'll get to in a minute. But before we get onto the post-mortem of the engine, I did receive a call before Hartech ripped into the engine at the start of September. So what they do is when they get around to looking at the car, they will do an initial inspection of the car, and it's almost like a light pre-purchase inspection basically. And I think the reason they do that is because they don't want to kind of get cars in that are hiding crash damage or severe corrosion or anything, majorly wrong like that. Any sort of red flags, because they said they have turned away work in the past where people brought in cars where that weren't entirely straight or whatever. So they did. Like I said, they did call me after inspecting the car. Obviously, it's fine, but they said they ran my car up to temperature and they listened to that noise themselves, and this noise. So they said that the M96, the noise is, they said it's reasonably common actually on the early M96 engines for them to do that. They said it might not be any one particular source. They said it could be things like where you've just got, quite long timing chains, comparatively weak chain tensioners, so that there just isn't quite enough pressure to get all the chains doing what they need to do and things like that. They also said the gudgeon pins on the pistons are off center, but the pistons aren't handed. So you can imagine that's not great for kind of balance across both banks of cylinders. They did want to make me aware that they could rebuild my engine and give it back to me and it still does the same thing. I think they said that has kind of happened before. So, in those situations they just kind of say, well, that's the engine you've got, that's the noise it makes. So don't go for a rebuild thinking that the only reason you're doing it is to get rid of that noise or whatever. Obviously in my case I wanted the 3.7. I've also got a curiosity about what's making that noise, so I said yeah, fine, carry on basically, and gave them the order to press on. Okay, so now we can get on to the post-mortem. So basically after that initial phone call, got a phone call from Hartech on the 14th of September, so a couple of weeks later from that initial inspection of the car, to say that they've got the engine apart. So basically we can get on to what they thought about that noise and, well, what they found really when they cracked the engine open. So let's have a look. So on the noise, they said they found that the engine had been rebuilt before, and my engine had steel liners with Nicosil coating or plating. Now, I did know that the engine had major work before, but unfortunately didn't have any of the detail behind that. And the reason for that is, although the car is 2 owners from new, the last guy had it 20 years. I bought it from just a normal backstreet garage, second-hand car dealer, who must have got the car from a trade auction. And I say that because certainly in this country, for data protection purposes, any receipts and things like that are found in a car that goes through one of those auctions just get shredded and get destroyed, which is a bit of a shame. However, obviously the car did come with the book pack and service records and things like that, and within that little wallet was this spreadsheet which I've digitised now, and I'm adding to it as I go as well, and do bits to the car. But as you can see, it's kind of a date and a mileage record of everything that's ever been done to the car, which is pretty useful. And in 2009, when the car had only done 30,000 miles, we can see here it says repaired damaged piston and relined engine block. Now, yeah, I don't know what went on there, what caused that, but I know from talking to Hartech that yes, engine now got steel liners with nickel coating, but what they did say was that they'd only replaced one piston. So there's one damaged piston, they only replaced one. They should have done all 6, because apparently my car's a 1998 build, so it's quite an early car, and the pistons, the piston part number was superseded very early on. So if you only replace one, you've got one of one type of piston and then 5 of a completely different design of piston. So that's not good in terms of balance, you know, for the engine. So that was a bit odd. And the other thing they found, which they couldn't really explain, or it might have been related to the odd piston, I don't know. But on one side of the engine, there was an unusual amount of wear on the small end bearings, and that could obviously cause looseness and movement, and therefore a noise. So that's what they found. The next part of the conversation moved on to what work was essential. So this is this little list here. So they said, obviously, lots of snapped bolts and things like that during the strip down. Obviously, replace those, goes without saying. Because of my particular situation with the small end bearing wear, I will need 3 connecting rods. So yeah, one side of the engine needs new connecting rods. That isn't normally the case, but it's something I need. They went through the car and they scanned all the various computers and things for fault codes and things. The only thing they could find in terms of a fault was an evap valve. Various exhaust brackets corroded, so they're going to replace some of those. Clutch and flywheel, so that wasn't a surprise. I wanted that doing anyway. Air pipes on top of the engine, I assume they mean vacuum lines and bits and bobs like that. Air oil separator and pipes, that's just what they do anyway, I think, with any rebuild, so they were going to do that regardless. Starter motor, which is surprising, but they did say mine was damaged or something. They're going to do a reconditioned unit, with a reconditioned Bosch unit for that. So and now we're on to the recommendations, so all the stuff they recommended to do whilst we were in there. Oil cooler, mine has seen better days. I knew I had a coolant leak at the oil cooler anyway. So water pump, now my water pump isn't that old actually. It's according to this spreadsheet, 2020 it was replaced, so not that long ago at all. But they said it was really noisy and it will need doing soon. So I don't know if a cheap one's gone on or whatever, I don't know. I was like, yeah, fine, replace that. Ignition coil covers, that's just the plate that goes over the ignition coils. Mine are original, they're present, but they're original, so they're starting to look a bit tired and a bit corroded, I think, so that's fair enough. Belt roller, again, I think if you're doing stuff at the front of the engine, or is it the back on a Porsche, I don't know, then fair enough. Yeah, belts, rollers, whatever. Coolant tank, mine's original, and it's virtually brown, so definitely putting a new one of them in. Next one was my idea, refurbish the alternator, and that's just because, well, yeah, it's an old car. If you're saying my rollers are noisy and my water pump's noisy and all that stuff, and all that's being renewed, then you might as well renew bits in the alternator as well, and just make sure that's okay and nice and quiet and doing its job as well. Next one, rear brake pipes. So these ones are specifically the one that goes over the gearbox, just because that's original on my car. And actually, I think mine's been hacked. So I think it's had a repair in the past where they've just chopped a section off and put some copper in. So they're going to redo all that, which I'm all in favour of. Next one, gearbox mount. Mine is shot. Apparently, it's gone. So getting a new one, nice and simple. Now the next thing here, chain tensioners and 24 tappets. Now this isn't something they normally recommend, but they've said on mine, because I have got that noise, it could be a problem with the chain tensioners and tappets. Could be. It's one of those things, as a standalone job, it would be very expensive to do, but while the engine's in bits, I'm just paying for the parts. And I think in the context of a full rebuild, in terms of the cost and the effort required, an extra 900 quid just to rule out the possibility that that's contributing to that noise. I've gone for it anyway. So basically, yeah, like I say, those are the strong recommendations. With this chain tensioner and tappets was a bit of an add-on to that. I have accepted all of their strong recommendations, and now we move on to their light recommendations. So one thing they said is that whilst the heads and the block go through various different processes as part of the rebuild, they don't come out looking brand new, put it that way. So they do offer a vapor blasting service, and it gives it a lovely shiny finish and stuff like that. So you can look at your engine and it looks all lovely and stuff like that. But they do charge £600 plus VAT for that pleasure. From my point of view, I mean, you can't see the engine, even if you flip the lid. You can't see the engine. You have to crawl underneath to have a look at it. So it's not worth it in my view. So I said no to that. The next one. So there's specifically the exhaust muffler brackets, one each side. Mine are lightly corroded, so they're not going to fall apart or anything like that. But they're 250 quid a side. No, not worth it for me at this point. So I said no to that. Next one, they said clutch slave cylinder. They're detecting a little bit of wear. I've just said, yeah, for the sake of £200, just replace the clutch slave cylinder. So they're going to do that. Next one, gear selection cables. Now they just said there's just a bit of play and a bit of slop there, I think. I've actually got a plan for the cables. I'm going to do that myself. So I told them to leave that alone. Next up, oil pressure switch. Now this one was in lightly recommend, but actually they said they were going to do that anyway. So I'm not sure why it was there, but they're going to replace them with my oil pressure switch. So it's fair enough. I don't know how much they are, but I don't think they're very expensive. Next one there, starter motor wiring harness. I think someone mentioned in the comments, one of my previous videos, that if I do the starter motor, I should get the wiring harness done at the same time. So I was like, yeah, fine, I'll accept that as well. I think they just said it looked a bit worn or something. I don't know how. I've never seen this wiring harness. I don't know how they can look worn, but whatever, fine. And then there's a couple of extra bits I added on. So engine mounts. So my engine mounts are original. They can and do fail, and I'm getting a new gearbox mount, so just might as well get new engine mounts. I know it's an easy kind of DIY thing, but this one, the engine mounts, and this one actually, oil pressure relief valve, these are a couple of kind of things where I'm just paying for the parts. I'm not paying for their labour, because the labour is already covered by the kind of base rebuild cost. They've got to put engine mounts in them anyway. They were going to have to reuse the old oil pressure relief valve, so why not just replace this stuff while we're here? now we're on to the kind of other stuff to mention, basically. So they said that, I kind of mentioned earlier, they kind of go through the various computer systems and read all the codes and things like that. One thing, I'm pretty sure this came up in the pre-purchase inspection, but they didn't find any of the kind of severe over rev events or anything like that. They did notice one was from when the clutch let go, because they said that very, very, very recently, in terms of driving time, they did notice that I'd bounced off the rev limiter, and that must have been when the clutch let go. I was like, yeah, that was me. That's probably me. But they didn't find any. There's no mechanical over revs or anything like that, which is good. They said also that my right hand radiator fan low speed was not functioning, and they said it's probably the resistor. I'm not entirely convinced on that one. When the car comes back, I'll look at that. I'm going to bridge the connection for the relay, and if it works, then I'm going to replace that relay. I'm pretty sure it's a relay myself, but I'll fix that. Gear selector notchy. Again, I've got a plan for that. When the car comes back, I'm going to replace the shifter and the cables. My steering rack hard lines are lightly corroded. Nothing to worry about now, but just keep an eye on it. Same with the fuel tank straps. They said my rear dampers are looking tired. Now they're not leaking or anything. I think they're just pointing out that, it's a 23-year-old car. The rear dampers are original. They said, what's this one? Front brake hose bracket bolts missing. It's not as if that bracket can go anywhere, so it's not flapping about or anything like that. It's not urgent, but I'll make a note to replace those. I think they're M6. I'll make a note to replace those as and when. Left-hand front brake pad wear sensor not routed properly. So I've got all that stuff. I've got the discs and pads and wear sensors and shims and all that stuff. So they'll go on the car as soon as it comes back from a rebuild. And then they said my rear under tray is broken in a few places. So I'll look at that myself. If there's any risk of it starting to flap about, I'll order a new one. We'll see how that goes. I'm pretty sure I have to remove that rear under tray anyway to do the gear selector cables. So we'll see. But yeah, that's it for that. So obviously I've got a good idea of how much that is all going to cost. There's not much point going through all that now because I don't have the itemised breakdown, so I can't say at the minute what costs are all that extra stuff I wanted doing and what's the kind of cost of the rebuild at the moment and the capacity increase. So I'm going to wait until it's kind of all done and dusted and I get that invoice, and we'll go through that kind of line by line when that comes through. But the only other thing we discussed was around timings. Now, sort of middle of September at the moment, we're looking at mid to late October for the kind of rebuild and the capacity increase to be complete. Hartech will then do the first 50 to 100 miles on a rolling road. They will then send it off for tuning. So this is a bit I didn't know about actually. It's quite interesting. The car basically gets a bespoke tune. What they actually do is the aim is to kind of smooth out all the peaks and troughs in the torque curve, and they do that by moving the points at which things open and shut to account for the increased capacity. So once that's all done, they give you a dyno printout as well of what your engine does. And I think that's pretty cool. It's completely bespoke tune, so no two engines will be the same in terms of their output. So that's good. So I'll also share the results of that when that comes through. That's all very good. But that is going to be, I think, mid to late October for the rebuild, and then once the tuning is done, I think we'll be looking at November time for that. So yeah, we've got a while to wait at the moment, unfortunately. So once that's done, what then happens is I get the car, and then I do the next 2,000 to 3,000 miles, and apparently that's kind of mixed driving, so I'm not allowed to be too gentle with it. It's not like a normal kind of braking period. So they kind of encourage you to push it a little bit, and that is because they want wear to occur, because that's how kind of everything gets bedded in. And you kind of do that with you do that 2 to 3,000 miles with break-in oil, which is kind of, I think, just cheap oil, to be honest. Then you take it back to Hartech, and this is all included in the price, and then they do all their final checks and things like that, and then they drop the oil, obviously just change oil and filter for the good stuff, and then that's it. When it's all done and dusted, it will be, well, we'll be into 2023. That's when I'll reach out to JM once it's fully bedded in and I know everything's okay, and we'll get him to do the review of the car. Between me getting it back and sending it back off to Hartech again after the 2 to 3,000 miles period, I am planning some more work anyway. So yeah, by the time JM gets to drive it, in 2023, it'll be a pretty well sorted car, I'd like to think. That's where we're at the moment. So the next video will likely be October or possibly November now, I don't know, where we will go through all the costs, and after that will be going to pick it up and anything that can, some work that comes after that. So there we go, exciting times. It's all happening, and once again, thank you very much for the ongoing support and engagement from you guys. It's really cool. Thank you very much. So keep the likes coming, and I'll keep the videos coming. But for now, thank you very much.